As soon as the music ended, Jack became nervous all of a sudden. There was a feeling that, if he wasn't the one that was chosen, he would surely kill someone here. But, he managed to suppress this feeling. On the other hand, Benson did not wait for the lady in the middle of the dance floor to mention who her partner was going to be. He immediately got onto his feet and began heading towards the dance floor. His current expression was quite smug. He turned around and gazed at the group behind him. After giving them a contemptuous smile, he turned around and began walking again. Jack, on the other hand, looked at Ben's back with rage fuming inside his heart. His emotions were quite getting out of control. But at the end of it all, he managed to make himself to calm down. In his mind, he made himself believe that Benson was just bluffing them. Since the hostess had not yet mentioned the partner, he decided to keep calm and wait. But not long after that, his heart skipped a beat the moment that he saw the lady glancing towards their direction. Currently, Ben was directly in front of him. As she gazed towards him or Ben, Jack couldn't help but clench his fists tightly. They were currently seated some distance from the dance floor. As a result, it would take a few seconds for Ben to reach the floor. Anderson and the others were emotionally unstable due to the fact that their enemy was going to take the first dance on the floor of the banquet that had been held their own home ground. This was absolutely no good feeling at all. They were just about to start talking about this and that so that they could pull their attention from Ben, when Jack suddenly stood up. They were quite surprised at first, but they thought that he wanted to see how the first dance was going to be performed. In the end, Jack did something that they were not expecting. After standing up, without saying a single word, he strode towards the dance floor. Anderson and the others were immediately flustered. They were present when Ben had insulted him. And not just him, but all of them. In their minds right now, they thought that Jack was going to compete with Ben to get the first dance of the banquet. "Jack, it is better if you don't go. You can simply go after the first dance is over." William immediately tried to persuade him to stay. "Yeah, it is just a first dance. There's no need to get flustered at this moment and suffer worse consequences at the end of it all." Even Kelly could not hold it anymore and tried to persuade him not to go. During the chats that they had been having, they found that although Jack was quite cold, he wasn't someone who put on airs of a superior. In fact, he was an easygoing person. It was just that, his face was not used to smiling. Thus, they hadn't seen his smile yet. Jack completely ignored what they were trying to tell him and headed towards the dance floor. He had his own reasons for heading there instead of staying and being an audience to the first dance of the night. As he walked towards the dance floor, Ben felt that the world was his. After all, he knew a little about Celine's background. Although not by a large margin, at least he knew that, not only was she beautiful, but she was capable in managing businesses. Although he was a playboy, that did not mean that he was an idiot. He was just enjoying his youth. But at the end of it all, he knew that, the responsibility that he carried as the only heir of the Tawal family wasn't something small. He was the one that was supposed to lead their family to another level and not to make it drop by a level or two. So, when it came to issues concerning marriage, he had decided to find a capable and rich girl that could be married into his family. In this way, he would be able to improve the family condition and influence. After all, if his family and the girl's family had a good relationship, the connections that he would have gotten would help him in carrying out many business projects. The best candidate that he had found so far was Celine. Not only was she a beauty, but her family wasn't poor as well. In fact, the word poor wasn't supposed to be mentioned when talking about her or her family. Her capabilities could not be doubted when one looked at the present issue. She was the one that was starting a company. While he was in his thoughts, he arrived before the dance floor. He looked at the beautiful Celine and smiled. Although her face could not be seen clearly, he could still see her. As he smiled, he said, "Thank you, Miss Gravy, for accepting my request of the first dance." Even as he said these words, the smugness and arrogance within them could be easily detected. Celine frowned the moment that she had his words. She then looked at him as if she was looking at a fool. She then wondered to herself, what type of medicine did young Master Ben take on this day? Benson didn't see the change in expression on Celine's face. So, he continued rambling about this and that. It was only after a minute that he noticed that something was not right. He was not the only one, as all those that had attended the banquet were currently looking at Celine with confused gazes. According to what they knew, the dance should have already begun a minute ago, the moment that the chosen partner arrived on the dance floor. But now, a minute had already gone by, but Celine showed no movements at all. She was the hostess, so, she had to point out who her partner was. So, Although Ben guessed that he was the one, he didn't step on the dance floor without being pointed at. Just as they were about to question what was going on, Faith's voice echoed, and the words that were said were quite stunning. "I am sorry, young Master Ben, but you are not the partner that has been selected for the first dance." Ben was stunned the moment that he heard these words. He was confused for a moment before looking directly into Celine's eyes and asked, "Not me? Are you sure that you are not mistaken? After all, amongst the young generation that have attended today, I am the best of them all. Furthermore, I was the one that asked for this opportunity the last time that we met last week." Ben had folded his hands in front of his chest as he looked at Faith. "If I am right, I do remember that young Miss had rejected your invitation previously." Faith said these words coldly. She knew that there must be a reason as to why Celine decided to participate in the first dance of the banquet. But the partner that she had chosen was obviously not Ben. If it was not for the fact that she was quite curious about him, she would definitely not participate in the dancing. After all, it was already enough face for her to be present on this particular day. She was from the Gravy family. It was a family that none of the ones present in Inchoate could compete with. "If it is not me, then tell me, who is it that can compete with me?" Ben asked as his face darkened. When he was coming towards the dance floor, he hadn't expected that he would be rejected before stepping onto the dance floor. Currently, his anger was already simmering. He wanted to know just who had the guts to compete with him. Celine's expression was currently cold. She looked behind Ben and said slowly, "The one behind you." Benson immediately turned around, ready to see who was so unique or special that he could attract the attention of the lady that he was chasing after. His movements immediately froze the moment that he met the cold and indifferent blue eyes. This was the second time that he was seeing these kind of eyes. The first time was obviously the moment that he had completely angered Jack. And now, as these eyes stared at him, he felt his body trembling a little. In Jack's presence, his usually arrogant expression was forced to disappear. "Why are you here?" After regaining his composure, Ben immediately asked aggressively. For a lifetime, he had never expected that the person that he was busy humiliating previously, the one that he had boasted to about being the hostess's partner, was actually the real partner. He was indeed angry, but as there were many eyes that were currently observing him, he dared not to threaten nor insult Jack. After all, if he did that, his already stained reputation would be soaked into the mud again. Of course, Jack had no obligation of replying to this question, so he just passed by the side and stepped onto the dance floor. There, his blue eyes that were originally cold and indifferent immediately changed. All the coldness immediately disappeared, and what replaced it was complicated emotions. The two stared at each other for a moment of time, and were only brought back to the present by the sound of music. Since the music had already begun, it was obvious that the dance had to begin as well. They each stepped closer to each other. Then, as Celine placed her hands around his neck, he wrapped his hands around her slim waist. And bit by bit, they began moving their bodies according to the flow of the music. Jack's actions were well within the vision of William and the group. As he approached the stage, they were filled with trepidation. They had thought that Jack was going mad at that moment. And, the moment that he stopped behind Ben, they thought that Jack was going to make his move then. But, in the end, the news that they received almost made their minds buzz. It was so mind-blowing. The person that had just been bragging about being the hostess's partner was rejected. It turned out that he had previously asked for the chance, but was turned down. But now, as they thought about this, they couldn't help but wonder what had given him the confidence to say that he was going to have the first dance in front of them. But all the same, they were quite pleased seeing the dark expression on his usually arrogant face. For the first time, they could see him losing. Furthermore, they were quite waiting for the race that would take place this night, where he would lose once again. But what they were wondering about was the fact that, how had Jack known that Ben would be rejected? That was the question that was in their mind at that moment. But, in the next second, a bomb was detonated in their minds the moment that they heard Celine's words. "The one behind you." The person that was standing behind Ben at that moment was obviously Jack. The others were quite a distance away from the dance floor. The group looked at each other with funny expressions. It was obvious that none of them believed what they were seeing. "Ouch! Why did you pinch me? I wanted to confirm that I wasn't dreaming. Although it's only 8, I don't trust myself to be awake at this moment." "Then, why not pinch yourself? I already said that I don't trust myself." Was Jack messing with us before? I don't know. But, I think that's true. After all, he stood up and headed towards the dance floor without being called. I see now. That's the reason as to why he came without a partner. It turned that his partner was the organizer of the banquet. Yeah, no wonder he was staring at the door that led behind the stage previously during the meals. Did we just invite someone to his own banquet? Ha ha ha. This is a new record that we've made. By the way, they're quite a couple, right? Sure, they match each other. I like seeing Ben's current expression. By the way, that lady, I heard that she's from the Gravy family? You mean the one that's from the capital? I think so. After all, to be able to invite all these big wigs here, she must have some kind of reputation. But I don't think that's true. After all, if she's a member of such a prestigious family, why would she need to start a small company in our small inchoate city? Yeah, you're right. As they talked, Jack and Celine had already began dancing with the other's arm around the other's body. Their moves were trained, showing that they had both learned about dancing, and they weren't noobs. Previously, Jack had looked into her eyes when she was looking at his direction. At first, he had thought that she was looking at Ben. In the end, even after Ben moved, he saw that the eyes were still looking at him. The moment that he saw the very same expression as he had seen 3 times before, he immediately understood that she wanted him to be her partner. Jack was also full of questions that he would like to ask her about. This was going to be a good chance for him to ask that question. After all, their meetings before had no exchange of words. Now, as he felt her arms around his neck, as well as the softness in his hands as he held her slim waist, Jack could still feel that there was quite a big difference. During his practice in dancing, he'd obviously held a girl the same way. But in the end, the feeling that he was getting right now was completely different. Jack was someone that did things to the perfection. When he was learning about dancing, he was around 6 years old. He had put in a lot of effort to learn. All of this was to impress his mother. In the end, when he was 15, he had stopped training as his mother had died. I can see that you didn't want to participate in this dance previously, Jack took the initiative to ask. Celine stared at him for a moment before she replied with a question of her own. How did you know? You stood at the door. The meal was just before the dance, about 10 minutes. But, you appeared there. It was obvious that you didn't even want to show your face on the stage at all. Jack said all this as they continued moving according to the beats. You're quite perceptive, I see. Anyway, that was the truth. I didn't want to participate in this at all. But, when I saw you, I had to participate. After all, I'm quite curious about you, Celine said as she followed his movements as he led the dance. After all, the 2 times that we've met in the same week, you always got to hold me. As you're the first man to hold me like that other than my father, I of course had to be curious about you, Celine continued. Jack was silent for a moment before saying, you're not the only one. After all, the moment that I see you, I can detect some sense of familiarity. I was wondering if I had ever met you before. Celine raised her brows at Jack's words. She could already tell that he was telling the truth from his current expression. But, what had made her have that reaction was simply because, she too, had sensed some kind of familiarity from Jack. But no matter how much she tried to remember, she couldn't tell if they had ever met before. This was quite strange. But, to think that they had met before and none of them could remember, wasn't that absurd? That was unless all their memories about the other were wiped out. And for that, it was impossible. Nobody had the ability to change or delete their memories about the other, right? What do you say that we have a simple chat after the dance? Jack asked. He wanted to know more about this girl, a girl that had made his nights sometimes sleepless and sometimes so sweet that he didn't want to wake up. Celine looked at him and smiled. That will depend on how you perform in this dance. As she smiled, Jack, who was standing right next to her, in front of her, her face close to his, he could see how beautiful that smile was. The 2 dimples immediately made her look like a different person. This was the first time that he was seeing her enchanting smile. Not knowing why, but it seemed that he had been affected by her smile, as he returned the gesture. Unlike the previous shallow smiles, this was one that was full of his true thoughts at the moment. This smile was sincere. When Celine saw that smile etched on his face, she couldn't help but be dazed for a moment. That smile was indeed filled with a male's charm. Coupled with the handsome face, she thought that Jack was like a prince right from a painting. And because of this, her smile became even brighter. The spectating crowd was amazed by the 2. Not only were their dance moves well coordinated, as if they had practiced together before, but their moves completely matched the rhythm of the music. When Celine smiled, it was like a blooming flower. And then Jack's smile in return, it was like the cold moon giving a sense of warmth. the two smiles immediately attracted the appreciation of the spectators. Even Ben, who was watching the duo dance angrily, was forced to admit defeat. After all, the two smiles really complemented each other. But what he and the others were wondering about was, what are they talking about in that they're smiling like that? Even Faith was stunned by the smile that erupted from Celine's face. This was the first time that she'd seen that kind of carefree smile on her face. Even when facing her, who was like her sister, the smile was different from this. Even to her parents, it was always a smile that was different. In other words, this smile was quite unique. As for Jack, she didn't know why, but she nodded her head as she looked at him. But the show wasn't over at all. The reason for that being that the music had reached the part that would need fast movements. This was Celine's request to the one that was in charge of music. Back to the couple. You ready to have a competition on this dance? Jack asked with a smile. This was the smile that he had only shown to his mother. Ever since her death about 4 years ago, he had never shown it to another person. But now, he was showing it to a person that he didn't even know. Currently, it was as if all the people in the hall didn't exist at all. All that was there was, the two of them, the music and the dance floor. If there was a person that knew these two well was present, she would be completely stunned by this scene. Why was that? It was because Jack's smiles were rare and shallow. Although they were sincere, they were never that much enthusiastic. On the other hand, Celine's smiles were only seen by her parents, grandparents and finally, Faith, who was like her sister. In front of her subordinates and strangers, she was like a beautiful sculpture made of ice. Her expression was always cold. No matter if she was praising someone or talking about punishment, her expression remained the same. The only thing that changed was her tone. But now, these two people, who always had no smiles on their faces or were rare to smile, were brightly smiling at each other. Without them noticing it, the ice in their hearts had began melting. With a competitive spirit and eyes that were filled with determination, Celine replied, "Let's do it then." Her words were like a signal as the tempo of the music immediately shot upwards, and so was the movement of the two. Their first competition immediately began. As for the results, that would have to wait till the song ended. As the music echoed in the hall, the crowd present in the hall dared not to make a sound. Well, not that way though. The truth was that they were both watching a captivating scene in a daze. They had formed a circle. In the middle of the circle, there was a dance floor on which two people were dancing. The starlight that came from the ceiling of the hall illuminated the faces of the duo that were dancing. Although the light wasn't bright enough to allow them to see the faces of the two clearly, they could at least see that the duo were either beautiful or handsome. The way that they were dancing was brought to a level that they couldn't think about. Their every move and the beats of the song that was currently echoing in the hall were well matched. The movements of the two were well synced. It was as if they were sharing the same mind. After all, there was no collision nor was there any kind of mistake that would disrupt the flow of the dance. But what all these people didn't know was the fact that the two on the dance floor were actually competing. This was a competition between two people that were good at dancing. As the crowd watched, they were all amazed. More so the younger generation. After all, the ones that were on the dance floor were either younger than them or were of the same age as them. Jack and Celine didn't care about those that were watching them. All that was in their minds at this moment was to win the competition. They dared not to make a mistake and made sure to give it their all. Currently, the music was already at its peak. Thus, their movements were fast. And as they moved and bent into some weird angles, they still made sure that they were according to the flow of the music. As the song came towards the end, the tempo reduced. They fell in step, letting the rhythm control their movements. All the scenery and people around them had already dissolved. It was the two of them, alone, in their own world. Celine's emerald green eyes glistened, and a smile spread across her beautiful face. It truly was enchanting that it made Jack's smile brighter. Uncontrollable feelings surged through Jack's body, and his fingers tingled in delight. His hand brushed across her cheek. His body was acting on its own. No chains to hold him back from this pure paradise, where he could let go of all the restraints that had held him. This was the only time in a long time that he could ignore everything else and enjoy himself. Forget about the family, forget about saving money, forget about what he would do after leaving the family mansion. Forget everything but her. He drew her close to his chest, and she wrapped her arms around his neck. Her loosened black hair fell over her eyes, like a curtain blocking out the starlight, but he desired to see those emerald eyes. She began to withdraw her hand to brush away her hair, but his hand clutched onto hers, He carefully laid her thin hand on his shoulder. Then, he delicately tucked her loose hair behind her ear, and her emerald eyes twinkled back at him in greeting. Celine stared at Jack for a moment. Even now, she had completely forgotten about the business and companies that she had to manage. She forgot about her reputation as a cold boss lady. She wanted to be free and fly into the skies. Forget about the issues concerning contracts and decision-making. Forget about making profits or minimizing losses. But, just focus on being free and unrestrained. She set her head on his shoulder. They continued to dance, too lost in the music to halt. Time passed as their feet moved in sync. The moment that Jack's foot stepped left, Celine's would also land at that exact moment. During the finishing moves, Celine and Jack separated from each other but still had their hands connected. Then, Jack twirled Celine around for a moment before pulling her back towards him. The moment that Celine fell into his embrace, her hands rested on his shoulders and his held her by her waist. At that very moment, the music ended with the blue and green eyes staring into each other. When the music ended, there was silence in the hall. Nobody spoke at all, everyone was still drowned in the amazing performance of the two. It was only after a minute, when William couldn't wait to get his girl onto the dance floor and imitate the duo's moves, clapped, forcing the audience to applause. This was a performance that they had only watched on TV. Those that were performing on the screens were all professionals in dancing and had trained for a long period of time. Now, they could see such a dance with their own eyes. This was a blessing indeed. So, they made sure to clap vigorously. But, on seeing that the duo were not separating, they increased the intensity of clapping till their hands began aching. When the song ended, Celine and Jack had been staring at each other intensely. They could feel that the tempo of their heartbeats had changed. The connection and familiarity that was quite vague had been strengthened at this moment. When they heard the applause of the crowd, they came back from their own world. But, at the end of it all, they still didn't want to part from each other. But, it seemed that the audience couldn't take the scene of them staring at each other with ambiguous emotions in their eyes anymore. They clapped so vigorously and that, they felt that the hall was shaking from the vibrations of the claps of more than 100 attendees. So, they smiled before returning to their usual cold demeanors as they retreated. They decided to treat what had happened as nothing had happened. Right, they had lost their composure in front of many people, exposing their cheerful sides. But now, they immediately hid that side of theirs, waiting for the right moment that it would be revealed. Well, not just the right time, but the right person that deserved to see this side of theirs. Ben had been observing the dance from the beginning. Since he was closer to the dance floor, it was obvious that he had seen how beautiful Celine's smiles were. He was drowned in the smiles as he watched. But, in the end, his heart tightened as he clenched his fists in fury. After all, although he could see that smile, it was not directed towards him. It was directed towards another person. Apart from being embarrassed on this day, was he going to lose the girl that he had the intention to marry just like that? He couldn't accept such a fact. He was beginning to think of what to do when the tempo of the music rose. From here, he could see how delicate and fluid Celine's moves were. So, the thoughts about taking action against Jack were temporarily thrown at the back of his mind. When the music ended, he found himself clapping alongside the crowd. When they were not parting, he had unconsciously led the hard claps raining in the hall. It was only after the others joined him in the hard clapping that he realized what he was doing. What the FCK? I'm trying to make them part from each other only for it to be mistaken as a form of appreciation? Wait, why was I clapping in the first place? I guess I was clapping for her. Yes, I was clapping for her. For the next dancing session, I'll be her partner and I'll experience her moves. Then, after that, I'll make sure to punish that guy well. Ben continued consoling and lying to himself. He only regained his senses of the surroundings when he heard that the crowd was no longer clapping. He was just about to go ahead and ask Celine for a dance when he noticed that Jack and Celine had actually disappeared from the dance floor. He looked around, trying to find their traces, only to notice none. At this time, the others also went onto the dance floor. Their blood was already boiling from experiencing such a dance. So, they were hyped up to try it too. Ben grabbed one of his flunkies that happened to be passing by with his girl and asked, "Where has Mrs. Gravy gone to?" The guy looked at Ben with a weird expression. He thought to himself, this guy was the closest to the stage. But, at the end of it all, he didn't see her moving away. No, that can't be. So, he must be testing me, right? After a moment of silence and upon seeing Ben's impatient look, he replied, She left via the stage door with that silver-haired guy. On hearing these words, Ben's face showed his anger. He turned towards the door that led behind the set-up stage. But with the large crowd, he couldn't see what was happening there. So, he could only suppress his emotions for now while thinking, "Humph, we're going to have a race not long from now. I'll make sure to trample you under my feet. Just you wait." On the other hand, Faith looked at the screen of her phone. Currently, she was looking at the video that she'd recorded. In between somewhere, she had decided to record this video to preserve that smile that Celine had showed. At the same moment, she was having her own doubts. She wondered, did Celine lie to me? If they had never met before, then how come they can dance in sync as if they had trained together? And that smile, that's a smile that she has never shown to a man other than her grandfather and father. Not even her uncles or cousins have seen it. What is the mystery behind these two? She muttered to herself in the end. After seeing that the audience was quite eager to try the dance floor, Jack looked at Celine and said, "Let's have a chat, MMH." Celine looked back at him as she shrugged her shoulders. "Not a problem at all. But, where did you train those moves? After all, I found that they are exactly the same as mine, though they are the masculine part of it. I've been training back at home. But, I stopped about 5 years ago. As to why the moves are the same, I'm not sure about that," Jack replied honestly. "I see." She was just about to say another word when she noticed that they were still in the middle of the dancing floor. She threw Jack a gaze before leaving. Jack followed her. He was quite curious about this girl. How could he just let her go without satisfying his curiosity? The two walked out of the hall and took an elevator to the roof. "That's a good place to relax and enjoy the cool night breeze. It's summer after all," Celine explained. Jack nodded as he noticed that his body was sweating slightly. But the good thing was the fact that his suit was made of cashmere material. So, it was breathable. He could now understand why this suit was expensive. It was flexible, not a type that would lead to a person's movements being constrained. At this time, Jack took the opportunity of the lights being on in the elevator to observe Celine. Currently, her black hair, that was previously tied into a ponytail and had been let free during the dance, was quite messily lying on her back. Although it was messy, it didn't diminish her beauty at all. Instead, this added with her current stone expression, it gave her a certain type of charm. She was wearing no makeup on her face. As for the dress, she was wearing a yellow long-sleeved ballroom waltz evening gown. The gown was a reserved one as it only showed part of her neckline. The gown showed the upper body figure, from the petite waist upwards. As for the lower part of the gown, it was enlarged and had a black helm. Celine noticed Jack's gaze on her. But this gaze was unlike those gazes that always fell on her, the gazes full of lust, full of obsession, full of greed. This gaze was filled with appreciation. So, instead of feeling repulsive as usual, she welcomed such a gaze. After all, what was wrong if a person genuinely appreciated her beauty? Jack didn't know about Celine's thoughts at the moment. After looking at her for a moment, he realized that he had been staring for a while. He knew that it was quite inappropriate to do so. Thus, he turned his gaze away. A smile appeared at the corner of Celine's lips without even her noticing it. In her heart, she thought to herself, at least he's a gentleman. Ding! With that sound, the elevator opened. After getting out of it, they could see that there was a helipad on top of this 8-story building. The duo didn't have the intention of appreciating the helipad. Celine switched off the lights of the roof. Jack stared at her before noticing the reason why she did that after looking at the sky. They went and sat on one of the benches that was placed on the roof. Of course, these benches were connected to the roof, just in case the winds from a helicopter's propeller would have the intention of blowing them away. After sitting, they remained silent as the moonlight shone upon them. Today, the sky was cloudless. Thus, although the lights on the roof had been switched off, there was still 100 or so meters visibility due to the full moon in the sky. After a moment of silence, Jack took the initiative to speak. "What's that background of yours that brings all the big wigs of the city here with your invitation? I can guess it's nothing small." Celine smiled and replied, "Leave that aside. I have no intention of using my family's influence here and in Koet City. So, I can only talk about myself, just a little of course." Jack nodded. They were talking for the first time. So, it was obvious that she wouldn't tell him things that weren't important for him to know. They had to have reservations. "Yeah, you're right. I came here this week, on Monday. Today's the last day of my first week here. I'm planning to start something here," Jack stated after a moment. Celine stared at him with a surprised gaze. After all, She hadn't thought that Jack wasn't a resident of this city. After all, she had seen him with the young masters of this city. And from the way that they treated him, she could tell that they respected him. From this, she could infer that he was from a good background. But, from the way that Jack carried himself, he didn't look like a prodigal young master. He looked independent, responsible and charming. And, from his expression, she could tell that he wasn't a person that smiled so often. But, today, she had experienced his smile. So, she was quite proud of herself, forgetting that she too had revealed her most dazzling smile. "What do you want to start in such a small city?" Celine asked curiously. "I'm just trying to build my foundation. I know that I can't start this in a big city. After all, the competition there is quite high. But, at the end of it all, I'm sure that I'll expand to other big cities. As for what I'm starting, it's my enterprise." Celine was quite surprised that Jack was starting an enterprise all by himself. Considering the fact that he was starting this in a small city, it was obvious that he was depending on himself and not his background. "You're quite ambitious, I see," she muttered. "No man lacks an ambition. If there's one, then he's an incomplete one. Even if your ambition is not towards getting rich, succeeding in business and whatever, a man must have an ambition. Maybe, going to the moon, being the first person to live on another planet and so on," Jack replied calmly. Celine smiled at his words. "Well, I wish you luck. On my part, I'm starting a small company in the fashion and textiles industry. But this company is not mine. It belongs to a friend of mine that's currently abroad. She should be back in about 2 months. She had capital to start, but if she had to come back and start things by herself, it would take a long time. So, she asked me to help her in starting one here in Incoat City. In this way, when she's back, she can have something to do while at the same time have a source of income," Celine said. Jack could hear that, in her tone, there was some kind of yearning. Jack was wondering, what was she yearning for? Going abroad? Starting a company of her own? Being independent? Although he was curious, he didn't ask about that. "Well, starting a company surely needs dedication, capital and decisiveness," Jack stated. Even he, had it not been for the fact that he had the system, he surely wouldn't have dreamt of starting an enterprise at this moment. He would have struggled to gain both connections and capital before trying that. After all, an enterprise would surely not lack competition. He, who was targeted by his half-siblings as well as facing some veterans in the business sector, he would surely fall. "So, that was the reason you were in the government building?" Celine asked curiously. "Well, that can be considered as a reason. But, I was mainly there to acquire a few stores," Jack replied. Celine chuckled when she heard this. She then asked, "You want to start an enterprise that's made of stores?" "You can say that. In fact, they're grocery stores. But of course, if I'm starting an enterprise, I would do my best. So, the first thing that I'm starting with is the grocery department. It will be in the form of chain stores. But, their level would be higher than normal," Jack stated. "Oh, I see. When are you starting?" Celine nodded before asking. "The grocery department will be open tomorrow," Jack stated. That fast? Celine was surprised. After all, Jack had only been here for a week. But, he'd already established a department. One had to know that a department of an enterprise couldn't have a weak foundation. After all, if it was a weakness, there would surely be people that would exploit it to make sure that the enterprise falls. "You can come and observe tomorrow. I'm not good when it comes to business. But, I hope that with you present, maybe you can give me some pointers," Jack said as he looked at the moon. He was wondering if the income that came from the grocery store through the enterprise would have a monthly, season, semi-annually or annual multiplication. "Is that an invitation?" Celine asked with raised brows. "You can say so," Jack replied as he turned his gaze from the moon back towards her. "Then, where's my invitation card?" she asked with a smile. Upon hearing this, Jack was stunned for a moment. Then, he thought of how a banquet had been held today, to welcome a company to Incoat City. He had not made such an arrangement at all. So, on this question, Jack could only scratch the back of his head while responding. "Well, I never prepared anything like that. I wasn't going to make a grand entrance into the industry." "Are you serious? You know, when you invite some people from the upper echelons of the city during the opening, they would surely boost the popularity and reputation of your company," Celine said seriously. "Well, it's not like I'm starting something big, right? They're just grocery stores," Jack replied. "How much capital have you invested in the grocery department?" Celine asked. "How much capital have you invested in the grocery department?" Celine asked. Jack began calculating in his mind. From buying the stores to signing the supply contracts, to the salaries and vehicles that he had bought. The amount that he'd spent for the grocery department to be stabilized was over 100 million. Since they were talking here, there was no need for him to hide anything. I spent over 150 million. Jack said. All of this was said calmly, as if it was normal for him to spend that amount of money. But, who could blame him? He wanted his grocery to dominate the city. In other words, he wanted to monopolize the grocery market here in Incoed. So, he had to spend. When Celine heard Jack's words, her eyes immediately revealed shock as she stared at Jack. It was true that Celine was shocked by the amount of money that Jack had invested in the grocery department. 150 million, that wasn't a small amount of money. Although she had seen far big figures of money, she still thought that this was a big amount to start a grocery in such a small city. There were several cities that were far bigger than Incoed, and, if this 150 million was used as capital, the groceries would definitely develop well. Even though there would be tougher competition in the big cities, at least, the income would be higher. Are you serious about that? Celine asked Jack while looking at him incredulously. Jack was confused by her expression at this moment. He wondered if what he had just said was magical. So, he could only reply by saying, I had to get the stores, get someone that could supply me with the groceries, get the vehicles that can be used for delivery, warehouses that have conditions that would ensure that the groceries would remain fresh. Jack went on to say what he'd bought. The more Celine heard his words, the more shocked she became. How rich is he? And, is he sure that he's not a prodigal? Is all of this depending on himself? As thoughts ran through her mind, she couldn't help but spit out some of them. Jack, is that just the grocery department? Considering the fact that they're just beginning and they don't have any influence, if they collapse, you'll end up losing everything. Upon hearing Celine's words, Jack smiled to himself. He couldn't help but think about the fact that he had the system. With it, although he would gain less profit, he wouldn't be able to make a loss. That was unless all his stores were robbed or burned on the same day that he opened them. Otherwise, just a single week was enough for him to get all the money that he'd spent over 100 times. But, although he had the system, there was no way that he was going to agree running a business that was full of losses. After all, he was doing a business and not a charity. And for that reason, he had made sure that all the things that he did were according to quality and not just about quantity. All the stores that he'd bought were located in good positions and their performance before he bought them were good. I've spent money to buy the already existing groceries. So, at the end of the day, I won't be adding competition for them. I'm going to reduce the number of competitors. I bought the groceries all over the city. They would retain the competitors, but if that competitor happened to be bought by me, then the competition would be reduced, Jack explained. When Celine heard his explanation, she finally understood why he was so sure about what he was doing. He made sure not to create new competitors. As for the original ones, he made up for that by improving the quality of his stores, making them the best. After chatting for a while, Jack came to know that the company that was started by Celine for her friend used a starting capital of 100 million. By now, all the arrangements were completed. So, from next month, the company would start its operations. After that, Jack asked Celine if she knew where he could find a reliable manager or if she had a recommendation. Celine had been in business since she was about 16. Although at that time she was only handling small things, that didn't mean that she was idle. She knew many people in the almost 4 years that she's been in business. Yeah, I can recommend you to someone. But she's quite strict when it comes to handling things. Sometimes she forgets that she's the one that has been employed the moment that the employer makes a bad decision, Celine said with a chuckle. For this very reason, she's been fired 3 times. The recent reason for her dismissal was that the owner of the company that she was managing had decided to suddenly increase the price of items that they were selling. At that time, they had suffered some losses and he wanted to recover. In the end, she refuted and said that, if he dared to do that, the business will close down. In the end, after a round of argument, the owner of the company was furious that he immediately dismissed her. When Jack heard her words, his eyes shone brightly. That was the person that he wanted. A decisive person that only thought of the company and not some people who only thought of flattering their bosses. She's perfect. Can you introduce her to me? Jack asked. She will be here in about 3 days. Then, I'll let you meet her so that you can discuss about this, Celine replied. Jack had 8 managers if Agnes was counted as one. He now wanted to get a manager that could manage all the business operations. This manager had to get those that could deal with sales, finance and so on. Only in this way would the big burden that was on him be reduced or removed completely. Looking at the time, he found that it was nearing 9. But, since he had made a decision to race with Ben, there was no way that he could keep him hanging. He still had some more money to win. As for the issues of buying shares, he decided against it for now. He would just use the stock market to do the purchase. Then, he would make sure to have 100% ownership, which would on turn make him the sole decision maker. Only in this way could he agree to pour his money into the company. After all, how could he allow some shareholders to enjoy profits that they haven't worked hard for? They exchanged contact information and agreed that Jack would come and pick her up from the hotel the following day at 10 in the morning. When they got back to the banquet hall, they found that Faith was finalizing talking about the company. Of course, the duo only looked into the hall from the door but didn't enter. After a few minutes, Faith finished whatever she was saying and thus ending the banquet. The big wigs inside began interacting with each other as there were those that had come from other cities. On the other hand, the young masters began flirting with the ladies in the hall. After all, although they had come with a partner, that didn't necessarily imply that they were in a romantic relationship. Some were of course angry when they saw that someone was trying to seduce their partner while others were I don't cares. If not for the fact that they were inside Glaze Hotel, Jack was sure that there would have been a fight amongst these youths. As he watched the commotion, a group of people approached them. And upon seeing this, Celine immediately bid Jack goodbye and left together with Faith, heading to the 8th floor. It was obvious that they were staying in a presidential suite. The group that was approaching Jack had a young man leading them. This guy had a dark face that stated that he was ready to slaughter someone. But Jack completely ignored Ben's expression, considering that he was still angry with him calling him a dog, a stray one at that. He still had to make sure that this young master was going to suffer so that the arrogance that he'd accumulated would be dispelled. "You've got some guts on you, kid," Ben started the moment that he arrived in front of Jack. His expression was like that of an aggressive gangster. Jack completely ignored his words as he looked at William and the others that were following behind Ben. "You guys ready for a spin?" "Yeah, we're ready to win the race," William replied while looking at Ben's darkened face. He could even see that veins had already began popping up on Ben's face and neck. He could tell that Ben was really angry. And for this reason, he was happy that he could make a comeback. Ben didn't like the way that he was ignored. He went from being angry to being enraged. But he controlled his temper when he thought that there was still a race. When he thought of this, he smiled coldly as he stared at Jack and the others. He said, "Let's not waste our time. Let's get to the tracks and race. I want to end this as soon as possible." And with that, he left alongside his flunkies. William and the others snickered the moment that they heard these words. They couldn't wait for the show. Jack led the way as they headed towards the underground parking lot. Each and every one of them had their own cars parked down there. "Jack, you are so amazing. You told us that you didn't come with a partner today. So it turned out that your partner was actually the hostess of the banquet?" "Yeah, this is not good, Jack. Look how you make us spend much time trying to think who would be your partner for the dance. In the end, you already had your partner here. Now we look as clowns. How we were just talking about matching him and her. Not just that, we even invited him to his own banquet. How amazing we are. Guys, actually, this is the 3rd time that we are meeting. In fact, this is the first time that I'm talking to her." When Jack heard the nonsense that the group was spouting, he couldn't help but refute. But as usual, Jack's words were ignored. Actually, the group thought that he was just trying to lie his way out. So, they continued spouting more nonsense. "Jack, who are you trying to kid here? The way that the two of you interacted doesn't look like two people who are trying to know each other, but as if the two of you knew each other long ago. Yeah, no matter what you say, we can't believe anything that you are going to use to escape from explaining to us. And what's more is that the two of you left the banquet hall and went to discuss something in private. You tell us, if the two of you have never spoken before, how could the hostess accept having a chat with you?" At this point, Jack could only shake his head helplessly as he thought to himself, it seems that these people only believe when they are lied to. After all, this wasn't the first time that he had said the truth and they thought that he was lying to them. A good example would be the previous time that he participated in the race at Mount Bright. Although that wasn't the first time that he was driving a car, it was the first time that he participated in a race. And were it not for the fact that the system had granted him the professional driving skill, he would not have been able to beat both Steve and William's group. He would have been defeated thoroughly. By the way, I enjoyed seeing Ben's current face. Yeah. That guy is used to being so arrogant in that, whenever he sees us, he looks for a way to make sure that he can show his strength in front of us. Now, after all the boasting that he did about being the hostess's partner, he ended up not even participating in the dance. Ha ha ha, you guys are right. As he bragged, he never thought that he was a monkey performing in front of Jack. I can't wait to see him losing again once he competes with Jack. That's right, let's hurry up so that we can see him lose, apart from making him go back to his own city broke. By using the elevator, they arrived at the ground floor. From there, they took the elevator that led to the underground parking lot. This was the specialization that most of the buildings had in this era. This was just another security measure that they had implemented. After all, this would prevent people from sneaking in. As soon as they got to the underground parking lot, each and everyone in the group immediately went into his or her car. All those that had attended the banquet on this day were from rich families. Although they were not at the same level, as their family background differ from each other. But at the end of the day, all those that had attended the banquet had a car that was worth at least $1 million. Of course, this did not imply that they had bought the cars on a single day. There were some that had saved the money that they were being given for at least half a year or maybe a year before they could afford the cars that they were currently driving. This time, William and the others thought that Jack had come with his Bentley Continental GT. But, the moment that they saw him walking towards the Bugatti Veyron that had been parked not so far from their position, they were completely stunned. When they got to the underground parking lot before, each and every one of them had their minds fixed on how much they were going to earn after Jack won the race. So, the moment that they got to the underground parking lot, they had impatiently got into their cars, ready to drive towards Mount Bright. It was only William and the other 4 from the big 5 families of Inchoate City that remained. Seriously, Jack, how many secrets are you hiding? William could not help but blurt out this question. Not many at all. Jack replied with a shallow smile as he opened the doors of the Bugatti Veyron. The doors were like wings or a bird that was soaring in the sky. The moment that those who had already entered their cars noticed the commotion outside, they immediately rushed towards William and the others. They too were greatly shocked the moments that they set their eyes on the Bugatti Veyron. An ordinary Bugatti Veyron would have its price ranging $30 to $40 million. And from the way that Jack's Bugatti Veyron looked like, it was pretty obvious that it was a customized one. So, it was only obvious that it would cost a lot more. Jack, can I take a look at its interior? William immediately released the girl that he was holding in his hand and rushed towards the Bugatti Veyron like a maniac. It was kind of understandable because all those present really enjoyed racing, so, seeing a sports car really ignited their passion. Jack assented William's request. Upon Jack's agreement, not only William, but the entire group rushed towards the Bugatti Veyron to admire it. It was only when Jack reminded them that they were going to get late for the race that they came back to their senses. How much did you spend on getting this car? Anderson asked. Not that much, it should cost about $73 million. Jack replied nonchalantly. Although $73 million was a big amount of money, Jack was not the one that had paid this money. This was just a reward from the system after the qualitative increase of all the rewards that he had received from 7 stores. But of course, the reaction of the group was completely different. The moment that they heard that the Bugatti Veyron cost almost $100 million, they were stunned speechless. As for Jack's words of the car not costing that much, they completely disregarded them. How could spending over $50 million for a luxury car not be a lot of money? If this was spent on buying a plot of land, they could accept it. But now, all this money was spent on buying a Bugatti Veyron, a sports car. According to their thoughts, this car could only be used for showing off. After about another 5 minutes of chattering, the group left the hotel as they headed towards Mount Bright. It took them more than 30 minutes to get there. Upon arrival, they found that Ben and his flunkies had already arrived. And from their impatient look, it was obvious that they had arrived a long time ago and they were waiting for them. But the group did not care about his feelings at all. After all, they considered this race won already. Humph, I thought that you had chicken out. Ben stated the moment that he saw Jack and the others arriving at the management office, in charge of the racing competition. I was worried that you would have ran away the moment that we arrived. Turns out that you are not afraid of losing. Ismail snorted in return. Haha, just you wait until the competition is over. Ben laughed in anger before entering the management office. William and the others snickered to themselves as they followed him. Peter had already been informed by Ben about what was going to happen today. Previously, Peter had thought that there would be no big racing when he heard about the banquet that was being held in the city. But who would have thought that these young masters would still come to compete? But all of this was fine for him as he was going to earn more. The moment that he knew who were going to compete, he looked at Ben with pity in his eyes. But all of this was just momentarily as his gaze shifted towards Jack. "Mr. Jack, have you thought about my proposal?" he asked with a smile. "My answer still remains the same," Jack replied. Peter on the other hand could only shake his head helplessly. But he had to focus on the essence of today's issue. He already knew everyone present as they had already been here several times. Ben had been here to compete with William and the others. His skills were quite good. But when compared to who he was going to compete with, he was just a child. "Go ahead and make your bets, I will record them down for you," Peter stated after taking out a book. Ben glared at Jack for a moment before revealing a cold smile. With his eyes still set on Jack, he stated word by word, "If I win this race, I want you, Jack, to stay away from Miss Gravy. And another thing, I want you to kneel down at the center of the city and apologize to me." The moment that these words were stated, the crowd that was listening took a deep cold breath. The conditions that Ben had stated clearly made sure that Jack had no reputation left after he lost. On the other hand, the moment that Jack heard Ben mention Celine, his eyes turned cold. But he still remained calm and stated, "No problem at all." The moment that Ben saw that Jack had accepted, he became ecstatic. The moment that he would have won the race, he would not only make sure that Jack would stay away from Celine, but would also have repaid the debt of embarrassment that he had suffered tonight. "How many shares are in your hands?" Jack asked. Ben frowned the moment that he heard this question. "What about my shares?" he asked. "Since if I lose the race I will have my reputation stained, you have to pay something that is worth my reputation. So, for my bet, if you lose I want you to give me all the shares that you have in your hands plus $100 million. The moment that Jack stated his conditions, a thought ran through the minds of all present, isn't this betting too exaggerated? The moment that Jack's words were heard by Ben, his expression darkened. Whatever Jack wanted was far higher. If he lost this bet, he would surely lose more than just a few dollars. Currently, he was holding a few shares in his father's companies. He was given these shares so that he could attend meetings and hold a good position in these companies. Then, at the end of the day, he would start learning the ropes before his father retires. The more benefits he brings to the company, the more shares his father entrusted him to. So, for him to give away the shares, he surely would make a big loss that would surely make his father angry. No, not just angry, he would be disappointed with him. While thinking, he thought to himself, is it worth it all to lose all these for a woman? But before his thoughts could wander far away, Jack's voice interrupted. "Do you think that it's too much? Maybe you have no confidence in winning? If I were like you, I would have surely made you crawl around the city on your knees while apologizing. But that won't help me in any way. After all, your reputation and dignity doesn't concern me. So, I want to get something that can be of use to me," Jack stated as he looked at Ben. "Currently, I lack some connections. These shares would surely help me in that. As for that $100 million, that would be used for maintaining my car," he continued. Ben's expression darkened further. Jack's words had just made him even more furious, but he still maintained his sense of mind. He knew that it wasn't worth it making this bet. Although he was arrogant, that didn't mean that he was an idiot. "If you're not confident enough, then you can get lost. No need to waste our time. After all, I'm doing you a favor by racing with you. For Mrs. Gravy, I don't think I owe you an explanation. If you can't make her like you, then don't blame others for being better than you. So, I don't owe you a cent or explanation to bet with you." With that said, Jack turned around to leave. Although he really wanted to bet with this guy to earn a few bucks, there was no way that he was going to try persuading him to race if he had no guts. For Jack to kneel and apologize at the center of the city, that was a loss of his dignity and reputation. He was going to start a big enterprise. If he had such a dark history, then it won't be good for the reputation of his enterprise in the future. So, if Ben wanted him to bet on that, he surely would have to pay more. Even what Jack asked for was something very small. After all, with a decrease in his reputation, the profits that he would be earning would be lower and he may even suffer losses. His reputation was worth more. The reason as to why he agreed to the bet was obviously due to how confident he was in winning the race. "Hey, who are you calling not good enough? You think that I'm afraid of you? Then it's agreed on. I will give you all the shares in my hands and $150 million. Consider that $50 million a charity," Ben roared without care. At this moment, he remembered that he was good at racing. So, why should he be afraid that he would lose? Humph, he can even add more to this. That 50 million was just a means of making sure that Jack didn't back down when he saw how confident he was. He was tempting him. Jack halted his steps and looked at Ben with raised brows. He wondered to himself, had he asked for little money? If he knew that this guy could give out so much money, he surely would have made him spit out a few more $1 million. To Ben and the others, 50 million was just 50 million, but, to him, as long as he got them through a rightful means, he would have it multiplied by 100 times. At the end of it, he would have $5 billion. So, he accepted it. With a few $1 billion in his account, he would surely have his foothold faster. That was not to mention the fact that he would get shares in Ben's hands. Okay then. Let's sign a contract. The one that goes against it will have to pay 3 times what was originally supposed to be paid before. Jack stated as he looked at Peter. Not only Peter, but everyone present immediately had their eyes widening in disbelief. Wasn't this Jack a profiteer? He was looking for ways to make sure that Ben paid more. It was also at this moment that Ben noticed that Jack was taking advantage of him, but, since he had agreed, he wouldn't go back on his words. Furthermore, with his own confidence in driving, why should he be afraid of such a thing as losing? Okay. Let's sign the contract. And, I want the condition of one violating the contract to be that, if one is asked to pay and there's a more than 10 seconds of hesitation, it would be seen as violation of the contract, Ben stated. He knew that, since Jack had a good relationship with Celine, he surely wouldn't want his image to be destroyed in her presence. So, it was likely that he would hesitate. That hesitation was what he wanted. When Jack heard his words, he immediately revealed a shallow cold smile. He then thought to himself, maybe I'm not the only one who thinks that the price paid for my reputation is so small after all. Okay. But, I have a question here. Triple your current shares. If you will give me all the shares in your hands after losing the bet, how are you going to triple it after violating the contract? Jack asked curiously. Ben was surprised as he hadn't thought of this. But, after a moment of thinking, he said, I'll just compensate you with my property. You sure are confident that your fixed assets are worth double the price of the shares in your hands? Jack asked with raised brows. He could already see that this guy was trying to look for a loophole here. If the shares in his hands were worth $1 billion, he would have to have assets worth at least $2 billion. Was that possible? Considering that he owned no company at all, he only had shares, it was obvious that there was no way that the assets in his hands would reach such a big amount. Seeing that he was caught, Ben frowned for a moment. He gritted his teeth and said, I will ask part of the shares from my father. Jack wasn't the only one that was surprised by Ben's courage. William and the others were also surprised. After a moment, they smiled, thinking how this guy was going to be reduced to nothing in half an hour at most. Okay then. But, your old man has to give his word. Otherwise, there's no way that the condition is valid, Jack reminded. Upon hearing this, even Ben became flustered. He knew that there was no way that his father would agree to this. So, he only gritted his teeth and said venomously, you're going too far. Then, remove this condition. A person has to pay up according to the agreement. If not, he would be sued by the legal department of off-track racers. Ben had seen that he was falling into a disadvantage. At the end of it all, he decided to take back his words. Anyway, they hadn't signed a contract yet. Jack's impression of Ben improved by 0.0001%. It seemed that this guy knew when to give up when things went too far for him to manage. So, he didn't try taunting him. What he was going to lose was already enough to make him suffer for a good while. But, if he dared to come and look for trouble, Jack would surely not let him off the hook. So, his and Ben's bets were out of the way. But, there were others that needed to benefit from this, right? Can you make a bet with us? We don't want that much. Just $5 million for each of us if you lose the race. We're only 16, that would bring a total of 80 million. That amount is only pocket change to young Master Ben, right? William quipped. Ben frowned. He then thought to himself, why were these people too confident? But, I can't lose. It won't hurt to have a few people kneeling at the center of the city. So, he immediately agreed to the bet. This made the group so ecstatic. They were looking forward to earning some dollars, free dollars. All they had to do was sit there, wait for Jack to win the race before receiving their money. Although they were all from big families, their monthly allowance was only in $100,000s while William and the four was about $1 million in 2 months, which was the same as $500,000 a month. Of course, this money was monitored. If they spent it recklessly, their allowance for the next month would be reduced. If they earned 5 million each, they would end up with enough money to spend on better sports cars. Once they added the amount that they were saving, they would be driving better cars. Just this thought made their blood boil as they hungrily stared at Ben. Their gazes intimidated Ben. He wondered what had gotten into these guys in that they looked like they wanted to swallow him. "Boss, you have to see this." A flunky hurried towards Ben and showed him a video. Looking at the video, Ben's expression changed drastically. The video was one that showed Jack's car during the race on Friday. Although it was recorded, since Jack didn't allow for his image to be posted, it only showed his back and not his face. Looking at the back that looked familiar, Ben looked at Jack for a moment and wondered to himself, "Am I being played here?" Ben felt that there was something fishy here. After all, from the way that these guys were confident and the way that there was a sense of familiarity coming from Jack after he had watched the video, he began being skeptical about this race. He wondered where their confidence was coming from. But, after a moment of thinking, he couldn't find a single clue about it. In the end, he could only bite the bullet as they had already signed the contract. "Let's get going," he said to his flunkies after returning the phone to its owner, and with that, he headed towards the area where those that were participating in racing parked their cars. Jack and the others had nothing to do at the office, so they too headed towards the parking lot. The race would be a one-on-one. So, the preparations would be completed in at most 10 minutes. At this moment, a crowd had already formed at the spectators' stands. These people had rushed here upon hearing that the young masters of Incoit were going to race. So, there was a big crowd. However, most of them were wondering if the driving deity Jack would be present on this day. They had watched the videos. Although they didn't show his face, just from the fact that he was with the young masters, it was obvious that they knew each other. "Do you know who organized this race?" "Yeah. I heard that this is a race between the younger generation of Blue City and Incoit City." "What? You mean that Ben is here again? That bastard is always looking for a way to embarrass our young masters." "Humph, you guys don't know a thing. This time, the one that is racing with him is not William and the others." "Are you sure? If they're not going to race, then who's going to?" "I think that you're new to racing competitions, right? You haven't heard that our Incoit City has an expert in driving?" "Really? Why haven't I heard about him yet? Maybe because you are deaf?" "Hey, since when did I become deaf? If I were deaf, how would I be hearing you? Maybe you don't understand what I'm trying to say?" "Of course, how am I supposed to understand the rubbish that you're talking? You better get back to kindergarten so that you can learn how to speak well." "You, how dare you insult me? When did I insult you? I'm saying the truth." Of course, Jack and the others didn't know what was going on among the crowd of spectators, but, even if they knew, they wouldn't care at all. When they got to the parking lot, Ben's movements stiffened. He looked at the parked Bugatti Veyron with a frown on his face. Previously, he had seen this Bugatti Veyron in the parking lot of the Glaze Hotel. Although he admired it, he thought that it belonged to some big shot in the banquet. At that time, he'd said that some old men had began having youthful tastes. But, on seeing the Bugatti Veyron here, he could guess that the owner of this car wasn't an old man but a youngster. Now, he wondered what youngster owned this car. According to his memories, there was no youngster from Blue City or Incoit City that could afford the car. So, he turned to one of his flunkies and said, "Go around and ask who the owner of this car is." Even he was interested in such a car. He may make a request to drive it. He was sure that the owner of the cat wouldn't dare to deny him, right? Just as he was expecting his flunky to rush out and ask about the owner of the car, he heard William's excited voice. "Jack, are you going to drive the Bugatti Veyron? Ain't that going to be an overkill?" He frowned. This car belonged to Jack. At this moment, his heart skipped a beat. He knew that this car wasn't like those that were priced at 10 million and below. This was a car of at least 30 million. The price wasn't just for show. This car had a good engine, better acceleration, higher maximum speed and so on. If he could drive this car, he was sure that nobody would manage to beat him. But now, his opponent was the owner of this car. But at the same time, he began being skeptical about Jack's background. Not only did he know Celine, whose background was deep, but his own car was a customized version of Bugatti Veyron. According to what he could see, it should cost at least $50 million. Had he just said that he was giving out $50 million to Jack for charity? No wonder he said that the $100 million that he was asking for were to be used for maintaining the car. This implied that he was going to use this car in racing. He sensed danger, So, before Jack could reply, he shouted, "That won't happen. If you use this car, that would be cheating. We have to use the same type of car so that we can compete on our driving skills." "Ha ha ha. Look at you, young Master Ben. How's this cheating? This is Jack using his own money to get a good car for racing. He used his own abilities here. How can that be called cheating?" Luke laughed out. "Young Master Ben, I'm pretty sure that if this Bugatti Veyron was your car, you would have insisted on how right it was for you to use it in racing, right?" William asked with a sly smile. Ben almost wanted to nod. Not only did he wish that this car was his, but also thought that he was the only one with the right to own such a car. But at the last moment, he managed to rein in his impulse and snorted while looking at Jack. "There's no need for you to stare at me like that. You can choose whatever car you want us to use in racing," Jack stated. His skills were good enough to deal with this amateur as long as the difference between the cars wasn't big. Ben's expression lightened a little. He thought, if this was where you got your confidence from, now that it's out of the way, let me see what you'll do after I defeat you in the race. Ben decided that they would use Ferrari cars. There were 3 Mansory Ferrari Roma. These cars were worth at least $2 million if the customization costs were added. Ben took a red one and Jack took a blue one before driving to the starting line. They were going to wait for 5 minutes before the race began. Upon seeing the cars, the crowd immediately began cheering. But of course, they mostly cheered for Incoed City. The moment that they heard that the blue Ferrari Roma was the one that represented Incoed City, they cheered even louder. In 5 minutes, the screen dropped as usual. The countdown began as the engines of the 2 cars began revving madly. Jack was seated with William this time. Although he had been here before, he had yet to memorize the patterns of the road. So, he needed someone that could help him in the issue of guiding him on what bend came next. If he had come with his Bentley Continental GT, he wouldn't have to go through all this trouble considering the fact that his Bentley Continental GT had a map. William was ecstatic to have volunteered first. After all, he had seen the replay on how Jack drove the car. In turn, this time, he was going to experience it firsthand. For the first time, he was glad that George wasn't present. Otherwise, he surely would have lost the chance. The moment that the countdown ended, both vehicles rushed forward. Since there were only 2 cars racing this time, they had the same starting point. The cars only differed when it came to customization. But, in terms of speed of acceleration, they were all the same. So, they began by matching each other. Inside his car, Jack narrowed his eyes. Since this guy had insulted him, it was good for him to repay at this moment. So, he decided to make sure that he took the lead from the very start. Although he couldn't remember the roads well, he had at least gotten familiar with the road here. So, he was going to maximize his driving skills here. Switching the gears, his car began accelerating even faster than Ben's. Even William was stunned upon noticing this fact. Although the difference wasn't that big, the fact remained to be that Jack's car was faster than Ben's. Ben also noticed this. He floored the accelerator, trying to catch up. But in the end, he found that there was no difference at all. Jack's car was gaining distance and so was the gap between them. It had already began forming expanding. When they reached a corner, Ben was expecting to overtake Jack here due to his good driving skills. In the end, Jack's car didn't reduce its speed at all. It made a drift and the tires on one side were lifted off the ground by a few centimeters. Compared to the previous time, Jack could be said to have made a better drift. After all, last time, the tires rose in such a way that it seemed that the car was about to be overturned. Ben on the other hand was forced to reduce his speed by a lot to get past this sharp bend. By the time that he accelerated, he found that the gap between them had already been enlarged to over 150 meters. And that was just the beginning. For the first time, Ben experienced what was called professional driving, as, just after a few corners, he couldn't see Jack's taillights at all. With that, the pride that he'd been having all these years about being the best driver of the current younger generation was crushed into smithereens. His eyes lost light as he drove. He had tried catching up but was forced to give up racing. Now, he was only going to complete the race, nothing else. On the other hand, he could already see the shares in his hands slipping away. No, it wasn't slipping away. He had given it away with both hands. After all, by now, he already knew who Jack was. He had actually decided to compete with a person that was given a title in racing. He decided to compete with the driving deity Jack. This time, Jack spent 30 minutes and 23 seconds to complete the race. Although it wasn't the same as the record that he'd set before, that was due to the fact that the car that he'd used this time was inferior in terms of speed. Had the maximum speed of the car been higher, it was a sure bet that he would have broken the record that he'd previously set. The more familiar he got with the road, the more tactics he could use to make sure that he used the shortest time possible to reach the finish line. The crowd cheered even more. For the first time, ever since Ben began racing against the younger generation of Inchoate City, he'd been defeated. Furthermore, he'd been badly defeated. After all, they could see on the screen that Ben had already given up on the race. He was driving at a normal speed and it was estimated that he would reach the finish line in about 20 minutes. The moment that the crowd saw how the car was turning at the bends, they immediately knew who the driver was. It was their driving deity Jack. After all, there was nobody that had ever been here that had dared to do something crazy like that other than Jack. Most of the people present, if not 99% of them, were all residents of Inchoate City. This time, the roars and shouts of praise echoed on Mount Bright again. This time, it was even louder considering the fact that the spectators were more than happy as the reputation of their city had been saved. What's more, there were at least 40% more people than there were on Friday night. There were some that didn't have a place to seat at all. On this day, Peter surely made a good amount of money. After all those that attended had to pay a little fee. This money was what was used for maintenance of the equipment that was used here as well as prize money and salaries for those that were working here. The more races were held, the higher the amount of money that the off-track racers received. After parking the Ferrari Roma, Jack got out accompanied by a panting William. This guy was scared silly when he experienced how the car turned and drifted firsthand. Those looking from the side would obviously not have the feeling of drifting or being inside a car that threatened to overturn. So, although William thought that it was fun, this time, he was forced to respect George as he had managed to stay in a car that was driven a higher speed. "William, tell me, how is it?" Andrew asked the moment that Duo came out of the car. "You better not wish to try it out. I was almost scared to pssing myself," William said as he took a few deep breaths. "Is it that scary? Or are you playing a prank on us so that you can be the only one to experience Jack's driving?" Ismail asked as he eyed William suspiciously. The others also had the same thought in their minds. You guys can try it out yourselves if you get a chance. But I won't dare to do that ever again. Jack is a freak when it comes to driving." William waved the group off the moment that he saw that they weren't believing his words. The group looked at William before shifting their gazes towards Jack. They were quite curious about Jack's driving. Upon observing Jack, he looked normal. They wondered if the two had been in the same car or not. Jack didn't know the reason for the strange gazes, but he ignored them and decided to wait for Ben to finish the race. Currently, it was already 11 in the night. Since he had an appointment the following day, he had to make sure that he slept well. Otherwise, how was he going to hold a meeting of the upper management of the grocery department? So, he wanted this guy to finish the race faster so that he could receive the rewards that he was supposed to get. He found a place and sat alongside the group. About 20 minutes later, Ben finally arrived. After parking the car, he didn't alight from it. Instead, he continued sitting inside it. Just as they were thinking that he won't come down from the car, the door opened and Ben got out. His current expression was completely opposite of what it was just an hour ago. The arrogance had completely disappeared. His eyes seemed lost, but deep inside, if a person observed keenly, he would see that there was sadness as well as anger. Though sadness dominated the emotion that was deep inside his eyes. William and the others didn't care about his feelings at all. After all, he never cared about theirs after he'd won the race against them. He would always taunt them and say that they should quit racing considering the fact that their skills weren't on par. "Ha ha ha, young Master Ben, what happened there? Tisk tisk tisk. I thought that young Master was a pro. It turned out that he couldn't even compete at all. A 20 minutes range, that's too much." Right. Even when he defeated us back then, it was always a range of at most a minute. "Young Master Ben, you claimed to be the best driver not long ago. Now, here's a real pro, can you even compare?" "Hey guys, don't make our young Master Ben so agitated, he may fail to fulfill his end of the bet. Now that you remind me of that, I almost forgot that he owes me $5 million. The group kept on taunting Ben, making sure that all the anger that they had accumulated over the years that Ben had been suppressing them was vented out. Of course, it wasn't just William's group that was making a commotion. Ben's flunkies couldn't hold it back anymore and began attacking with words. You better stop throwing your mouth there. Why are you so smug as if you're the one that won the race? That's right. Do you think that you're so awesome? If not for Jack, do you think that your Incoed city can compare to our Blue City? Humph, you guys are cheating. You knew all too well that Jack is an expert, yet, you still planned the race. Right, that's cheating, we don't agree to this. William and the others were also fierce, but they became even more fierce the moment that they heard the flunkies talking about Jack. What did you just say right now? Can you repeat it again? I want to hear you clearly. Did you just say that we're only depending on Jack? Ben aside, all of you, come and race with me. We depend on Jack and you depend on Ben. Everything is fair and square. Who's that idiot saying that we're cheating? If I remember correctly, this race was proposed by your young master Ben. So, stop shifting blames. You don't accept the results? Then talk to off-track racers about that. Your young master already signed a contract. The videos of Jack's racing were all over the internet since Friday. If you didn't see them, that's your own fault. That's right. Even the name was there. It was stated clearly that the driver was named Driving Deity Jack. Were your eyes blind or were your ears deaf? Maybe both? Hey, I think that Ben saw the video before the race. I think that sharp-nosed guy is the one that showed him the video. The commotion was so big and that, it was only a little away from fighting. All of them knew that fighting here was prohibited. Furthermore, if they dared to fight here, the police would surely do their job well, as there were some that were stationed here for cases like this. Stop it, all of you. At this time, Ben, who had been standing there listlessly, finally spoke. He looked at his flunkies and they immediately shrank their necks. On the other hand, when he glared at William and the others, they returned the glare with their own. After taking a deep breath, Ben walked towards Jack step by step. He looked calm now, but the veins that were popping up on his forehead as well as his red eyes showed how angry he was. As he faced the enraged Ben, Jack didn't have a change in expression. Apart from the fact that fighting here was prohibited, he himself was not a weakling. Although he hadn't practiced fighting techniques, his body was fit enough. He went to the gym on a daily basis. So, it was obvious that he was strong. His training was balanced, making his muscles proportionate. So, he was not afraid of some young master that didn't practice at all. You got me this time, kid. I never thought that a professional in racing like you would try bullying someone like me, Ben said. His tone was cold. Jack raised his brows and said, Young Master Ben, if I remember correctly, this race was proposed by you, right? As for why I accepted, although I knew that you won't be able to defeat me, isn't the answer in the open? You provoked me first? You know, at first, I just wanted a race with a small bet. But, the moment that you insulted me, that was the moment that you made me decide to punish you a little, Jack finished. A little? Are all the shares in my hand plus $150 million that small to you? Ben shouted. Yeah. Something like, you'll hand over all of your family assets is considered big, don't you think so? Jack asked in return. Ben gritted his teeth in anger. After a moment, he took a deep breath as he tried calming down. He didn't want to start going physical only to suffer more than he'd already. At this moment, the two sides were facing each other. Those that didn't participate in the race were only observing from the side without saying a word. I'll fulfill one end of my bet today. As for the other one, transferring shares needs time. In 3 days, I'll transfer them over. Ben said as he headed towards the management office. He then stopped for a moment and looked at Jack before saying coldly, You've won this time. But, better not be proud of it. This is not over. Jack didn't take Ben's threat seriously at all. There was law in the country. And, if he dared to play underhanded tricks on him, he won't let him off at all. After all, how could he just remain silent when someone was attacking him? This time, he had targeted Ben himself. But, if he dared to continue trying to look for trouble with him, he would ensure that he would take his backing down. In just a month, as long as he put in some effort, he was sure that he would reach that level soon. Currently, he can earn at least $1 million from the stores a day. If it was multiplied, he would end up earning more than $100 million a day. As he thought to this point, he decided to start a security company next. It won't be a small one at all. It would have to be big. If possible, he wanted to make sure that he bought one that was already running. The reason for this was considering the fact that hiring a new management team and trying to enter the market would be somehow difficult. So, it would be better to get one that was already running. Furthermore, if there was a problem with the management, he would just make a few changes and that would be it. He nodded to himself before turning his attention to the group. William and the others nodded and followed him towards the management office. They each had a smile on their faces, ready to receive their own small incomes. The moment that they arrived in the management office, they found that Ben had just finished making a call. He hung up and stared at them. Without another word, he turned around and left. Jack raised a brow, but he did nothing. After all, what could he do in this kind of situation? So, he immediately entered the office. Peter saw them coming inside. He smiled at Jack. Even today, although the car that Jack had driven was inferior to the one before, he had seen that his performance was better than previous time that he was here. "Mr. Jack, any considerations?" Peter asked as he motioned for Jack to sit. There were only 2 chairs inside Peter's office. So, Jack sat and the other one was left for the lady, Kelly, to sit on it. "That's my decision for now. But maybe I may change my mind in the future." Jack shook his head. He would just buy this off-track racers in the future if he wanted to participate in racing. As for why he wasn't being direct and saying that he won't be participating in the racing as their genius, it was obvious that a person wasn't supposed to burn bridges. He might need Peter's help in the future after all. "Okay then, I'll wait for that future." Peter smiled bitterly as he shook his head. After a moment, he began typing on the computer on his desk. "So, the accounts remain the same?" he asked with his head still lowered. "Yes," everyone replied in unison. Peter was asking if the money was going to be transferred into the same accounts as the ones that they had used to pay for registration. After about a minute, Jack felt the phone in his pocket vibrate. Even without taking it out, he knew the reason behind the vibration as he had already received a system prompt. "You've earned $102 million. Multiplier applied. You've received $10.2 billion. Now, his account had enough money for him to solidify the grocery department as well as get a good security company. He already knew why he received the $2 million. It was from the off-track racers, reward for the winner. William and the other 15 received their own $5 million one by one. Their expressions right now was like that of a small child that had received what he wanted. After confirming that everything was in position, they left the office. Jack drove back to the Prince and Princess Palace. It was already 11:30 at night. The road was almost empty, so the Bugatti Veyron buzzed through the roads at high speeds. Of course he made sure to be careful on the road. Although it was almost midnight, he knew that the roads wouldn't be empty. As for the traffic police, he made sure to avoid them by using the less congested roads. But his speed on the road wasn't the same as the one during the race. Here, he maintained a lower speed of about 130 miles per hour. He slowed down whenever necessary. After getting to the palace, he took a shower before sleeping. After all, there was much work for him to do the following day. The following morning, he woke up at around 7. He went into the gym and did a few warm-up exercises before taking a shower and preparing himself a sumptuous breakfast. By the time that he got out of the mansion, it was already 9:03. The sun wasn't that hot yet, but he was in no mood to enjoy it. He took out his phone and made a call. After waiting for a few breaths, the call connected and a male voice came through. "Good morning, Mr. Jack." "Morning, Chris. Has everything been arranged?" Jack asked as he headed towards the Bentley Continental GT. "Yes, Mr. Jack. Everything is in position. We're only awaiting for your arrival," Chris replied. "That's good. I'll be there by 10:40. Oh, by the way, prepare an extra seat as there's someone else coming with me." Jack said a few more words before hanging up. After getting into the Bentley Continental GT, he was just about to drive away when he thought of something. The Flyers bank manager. He was sure that this guy had some connections. So, he was sure that he could help him in getting a good security company for him to buy. At the thought of this, he decided that he would go to the bank after he was done with the issue of the grocery department. Without wasting more time, he immediately drove towards the Glaze Hotel. Happy residential area, Dante family main mansion, inside a study room. Kevin looked at the report in his hands with a frown on his face. He had been holding this file for over 5 minutes now. But, his gaze remained lingering on a single page. On this page, there was an image that Jack would surely find it familiar. It was his image. Below the portrait, there were a few details about him. None of them was wrong. It stated his full names, his age, his educational background when he arrived here in Incoat City and a few more pieces of information about him. Kevin's gaze was currently fixated on Jack's full name. Jackson Alfonso. They didn't manage to find the details of where he was born and what his family background was. "Uncle Ruben, are you sure that this young man is not from Crystal City's Alfonso family?" Kevin asked as he looked at Ruben, who was standing not far from his position. Kevin himself was a middle-aged man with a few strands of gray hair on his head. Though, one had to be keen to be able to see them. Actually, I'm not too sure about it myself. According to what I know, any member of Alfonso family has a good position in the family business. But Jack, on the other hand, doesn't hold any position. Ruben stated with a frown on his old face. After a moment of pause, he continued, but for him to be able to pay for that building, this implies that he has money. But we know money alone isn't enough to protect someone. But what makes me a little worried is the fact that according to the information, he seemed to be familiar with the young lady of Gravy family. The moment that Kevin heard these words, his facial expression tightened for a moment. Then, he let out a sigh as he placed the file on the desk. He rubbed his forehead for a moment as he sighed again. After a moment, he looked at Ruben and said, "It seems that we'll have to be careful. Since the building is gone, let's change the plan if necessary. But we have to make sure that another plan is ready within a month at most. As for that, Jack, continue investigating his movements. If possible, check his accounts. I want to know his debts," Kevin instructed. "Yes, master," Ruben replied before leaving the study room. Back to Jack. After more than 20 minutes of driving, he arrived in front of the Glaze Hotel. He parked the car in the underground parking lot and decided to wait for Celine on the first floor. Unexpectedly, the moment that he arrived there, he found that Celine was there together with Faith. He raised his brows. He had thought that they would be meeting at 10. Unexpectedly, he found that she was here already. Well, not that it was bad. It would be good if he could finish all the projects at hand as fast as possible. After all, why would he want to delay his development? "Good morning." The moment that he got to the two ladies, Jack greeted like a gentleman that he was. "Morning," Celine and Faith replied. Now that they had gotten acquainted to each other, there were no more standoffs like the previous times that they had met. Jack couldn't help but be impressed by Celine's beauty. This time, her black hair was tied into a ponytail. Her face had a shallow layer of makeup. The dress that she was wearing this time was a short-sleeved green dress that matched the color of her eyes. This dress reached below her knees. Jack could only appreciate the beauty of this lady in this outfit, as, although it was an official dress, it still accentuated her features. "I thought that you were going to pick me up at 10, Celine asked amusedly. "I had to get here earlier just in case there would be traffic," Jack replied. "Can we go now?" Celine asked as she stood up from the couch. "Well, are the both of you going? If so, we'll have to get another car as mine can only carry a single passenger," Jack stated.